All right, guys, welcome. This is Breakfast with the Brand, the number one podcast in the world for entrepreneurs and leaders who want to take their brands to the next level. I am your host, Junior Frederick, and of course, I have with me the man himself, Mr. Bobby Stealth. And today we're going to be getting into an interesting conversation around branding, sales, and just business in general. All right, guys. So if you're live, go ahead and put some flames in the chat. Let us know where you're listening in from. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, then go ahead and put that in. Bobby, how you doing?
Man, guys, I'm doing phenomenal. I'm doing phenomenal. I woke up this morning and I said to myself, it's you versus you. It's you versus you. I don't know if anybody has ever said that to themselves. Like early in the morning, you get up, your eyes open, and you just think about life, and you're just like, it's me versus me. And then you,
Mhm.
boom, you just get to running. Like that's how I felt this morning. Like I really felt like I was the only thing standing between me and my next level. And that's a beautiful place to be because you control you. You can move whatever you want out of your own life in order to get closer to what it is that you're desiring. So I'm feeling phenomenal, brother. I'm feeling like I'm powerful, powerful, very powerful.
Yes, sir, you are. And on a level, Bobby, I feel like we all are powerful.
Yeah.
It's all about recognizing that power, right? We all have power. We all are powerful. It's about recognizing that power. And the reason I say that is because we all have potential. If you have potential, then you have power. Period. If you have potential, then you have power.
Mhm.
Potential is power. Knowledge is potential power. If you could acquire knowledge, then you could acquire potential power. All you have to do is exercise that power, right? Exercise that knowledge, you exercise that power, and then you could have the life you want. Literally just this morning before we came on, I was doing my regular training. I train every day, just so you know. I train my body, so I've also done my training for the day. I did a little bit of back, a little bit of chest, and then but I also train my mind. I train my mind. So I do regular sales trainings in the morning, as well as listen to audiobooks. So that's something I do like literally every single day. And I must say, man, like it's amazing. Like once you start to acquire knowledge, it's absolutely amazing where you can go. I was saying to myself that in 1 year, I set a huge goal for myself in literally 1 year to become or to be in a completely different space. So I'll tell you guys a little bit more about that later. But before we do that, Bobby, let's dive right in, man. Let's get started. Let's get the first set of questions going. I see Tia, shout out to you. I know we have a few more people watching. Definitely shout out to yourself as well. Dr. Michelle says, let me bring it up. She says, therapeutic, thankful Thursday from Detroit. Thank you, Dr. Michelle. All right, Bobby, let's get into it. Let's pick up, sort of where we left off. You might
Yes.
have you might have to remind me. You might have to remind me. I have so much going on.
No problem, Julia. No problem at all. I'm trying to remember the question. I believe it was Michelle. Dr. Clark left a question that we didn't get an opportunity to answer. And it was about investing all your profits. So we were talking yesterday about making money in business with the brand, what the brand's role is, what the marketing role is, what the sales role is. We were just talking about how all these things work together in order to build a successful business. And one of the things that we started talking about was the economics of business. We started talking about, okay, if I'm making sales, okay, and sales equals revenue, and then my revenue starts to turn into profit, well, what do I do with the profit? So then we talked about, okay, you invest that profit into infrastructure so that you can build and grow your business's longevity. Like you can really plant your flag. So as we started going down that conversation, a new question came up that we didn't get a chance to answer. And that question was, if I spend all of my money and all of my profit on growth, when do I keep any of it? So that was the question that we didn't get a chance to answer. So I'll go ahead and answer that question, and then we can just follow organically where this takes us. So yesterday I said there are three forms of money flow in a business. Now, Granted, there are a few others, but we're going to talk about the big three. So the big three are revenue, profit, and equity. Now, these are the three places that money normally exists. Granted, you have cash flow and things of that nature, income, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the big three, like the main three. So revenue is money in, profit is money left after expenses have been paid, and then equity is the money that it, or the value rather, the value of the asset over time. Okay, so Dr. Michelle put that question back in the chat. She says, when do we save money of the profits and what percentage? So to answer that question, we we really don't. We don't. So what do we do instead? We build or set equity targets. So if you've ever heard of a business say, hey, the valuation of my business is 3x multiple of the revenue generated, a 3x multiple. So 3x multiple could be of revenue generated annually, it could be of profits generated annually, or any other mechanism. So you're pretty much valuing the asset based off of its either profitability or its revenue or some combination of those metrics. And that's as deep as we're going to go. So what we really do is we actually focus on equity and not profit. And that's one of the biggest shifts from being an employee to being a business owner. So when you're an employee, what you're doing, and most people don't really think about this because it's been built into our society, what's happening is you have a 401k. So the 401k is where your money goes, a portion of it anyway, a percentage of it, in order for you to retire, in order for you to have money left over after you're done working. In a business, you don't have that 401k reality. Instead, what you have is completely different. You have equity. So equity is what you build up in the business over time so that when you're ready to retire the business or retire from business, you actually have something that you can show for your activity. So to answer your question in short, what you do is you set an equity target. You say, I want my business to be worth this much money. And then you work on making sure the branding is good, the marketing is effective, and the sales are strong, because those are what's going to make your business marketable to other buyers when you're ready to sell it. And then that's as far as I'm going to go, because there's other things you can
Oh,
do. Most people sell their businesses.
yeah. So I have a question. That's a good question, by the way. So let's stay in that sort of train of thought. My like as somebody, by the way, guys, I don't have any like okay, I did like basic accounting in school, but I don't have any like accounting. I'm not an accounting master. So Bobby, my question to you is like, okay, so how do I survive? So I'm the average person. I'm starting a business. Like, well, how do I live? Are you saying that I'm supposed to like have a job while I build a business? Because what I hear you saying is don't take money out of the business. I'm wondering, well, like, how do I buy groceries? How do I do like my living expenses? Does it come from the money in the business, or are you saying that people should have another source of income while they're building the business? Can you like clarify that?
Sure, sure. So there are four quadrants. All right. You have employees, you have self employed, you have business owners, and you have investors. Now, most people are in between two of these quadrants at the same time. That's okay. But if you're in between two of these quadrants at the same time, that's going to determine how you execute this. So I'm going to be very brief in my explanation of this. If you are an employee and you're looking to become self-employed, that's most people in America. Like you are working a 9 to 5 and you're looking to become a person that works for yourself. Just because you're self-employed does not make you a business owner. Okay. So a business owner is someone who owns a system, and that system produces profits predictably over time. That's a business owner because you own the system and the system is the business. A self-employed individual is someone who owns themselves and they have a skill set and they're able to trade that skill set for revenue, for capital. So someone that is self-employed is not necessarily a business owner. So if you're And the cycle I gave it to you is chronological. So most people start as employees, then we become self-employed, then we become business owners, then we become investors. That's the trajectory that most people take to financial freedom. So if you are starting out, what this normally looks like is you have both. You have a 9 to 5 job and you're self-employed. So you're learning how to build your business, right? You're learning how to actually make money with your skill set while working a 9 to 5. Okay. And while you're doing that, your 9 to 5 pays for your basic necessities, and all your business income goes into purchasing the various components of a business system. So you can go buy a business like a franchise, a McDonald's, and they're going to ask you for $1.5 million. Most people don't have $1.5 million laying around, $2.5 million laying around. You can buy a Chick-fil-A. Like, you can buy a business system, but it costs several millions of dollars. If you don't have several millions of dollars out the gate, what do? You purchase the business system, one system component at a time. And you do that through your self-employment. So you get self-employed, you make 6 figures. You then take those 6 figures and you might buy a marketing system, such as a website. And then you work another year and you do another 6 figures. And then you may buy a sales system, which includes funnels, appointment setters, closers. Then you may buy another component of the system, which is a team member or 2 or 3 team members to help run the system, a project manager. So all of these things are what you do. Once you've left the workforce completely because you're self-employed and you've built enough of a system to provide for yourself as a self-employed individual, this is where the money goes next. So next, you pay yourself a wage. So there's 2 ways you can take money out of a business. You can pay yourself a salary. I keep getting all these balloons. You can pay yourself a salary, or you can do what's called an owner's draw. So if you pay yourself a salary, you're going to pay taxes on that money month to month, week to week, however often you pay yourself. To avoid those taxes, what most people do is they pay themselves they do an owner's draw. So at the end of the month, they take money out of the equity of the company. However you do it, that's how you survive as a self-employed entity. You take money and you pay yourself from the business's equity, not from the business's revenue and not necessarily from the business's profit. If you are paying yourself a wage, you are an expense on the balance sheet. So it's already coming out of the revenue and it's coming out of the profit together, because it's not counted as profit, because profit is revenue minus expenses. So because your wage is an expense, it automatically comes out. But I said I'd be brief, so I'm going to tie it up
Yeah.
there.
So, okay. So hold on. So, okay. So let's go back to what you just mentioned. So, all right. So if I'm paying myself, so let's say I decide to, let's say $5,000 comes in, I decide to take out 2.5 from the business. You're saying that that's classed as a salary. Is that what you're saying? That's classified as a salary?
That's classified as an expense depending on how you write it up. So we're definitely getting into my world today, the world of accounting. But
Yeah.
yes, Junior, I'm saying that you could do that one of 2 ways. You could write that off as an owner's draw, in which you take it out of the company's equity on the balance sheet, or you can write it up as a business expense where you pay it out as a salary or a working capital liability. And in that case, it will come out as an expense. So one comes out of the equity, the other one comes out of the revenue.
So explain, what does that mean? Now we're going deep for the people that have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. So what is the difference between taking it out of the equity? Like, what does that even mean? Taking it out of the equity and taking it out of the revenue. Tell us more about that.
So here's something you guys want to write down if you're taking notes. And I know that you guys are very intelligent, so you are taking notes. So the accounting equation is universal. All right. The accounting equation is universal. So here's what the accounting equation states. It is assets plus liabilities equal equity. Assets plus liability equal equity. All right. So equity, this is an equation because it has to balance. So your assets plus your liabilities have to be exactly the same as your equity, because those 2 components together equal equity. Okay. So assets would obviously be revenue in, right? So sales is an asset or money coming in. Now, a liability would be an expense. Now, if you were to keep it very simple, you would be able to take your wages out as an expense. Okay? Wages could come out of it as an expense. If the wages come out as an expense, then they're treated as a liability. Okay? So your business has assets and liabilities. You can be a liability to your business if you are, and that's not a bad thing, so to speak. Granted, if you think about it in a broad stroke, it's bad. Like, oh, I'm a liability to my business. No, if you just think about it in dollars and cents, your income could be a liability to the business, and that's proper. That means there is a LLC that's actually doing its job. The LLC is designed to separate the business from the individual. And most people are not doing that effectively, but we're not going to get into that. So what happens is if you have a wage, then you are a liability. Now, let's say you do it the other way and you have an owner's draw. That means you are not counting your payment, your compensation as the owner in the business's expenses. You're not doing that. Instead, you're letting the business run its revenue in, collect revenue in, then you're paying all of the business's expenses with the revenue, and then you're taking the profit and you're reinvesting the profit in growth, and then whatever you have left over, because there's this thing called diminishing returns. Again, we're getting into my world. So you can't invest, you're not always going to be able to responsibly invest all of your profit. And that's where you want to get to. You want to get to a point where you've made a profit and you've invested all of the profit that you can invest responsibly, because there's like nothing else you can invest in that makes sense. So now what's left is what we call retained earnings. And retained earnings is not profit, but an equity. And equity is where people that want to do an owner's draw get paid from. So they don't get paid as an expense to their business, because they don't want to be a liability to their business. And that's completely fine. So what they do instead is they take money out of the equity of the business, meaning after the business has grown, after the business has paid expenses, whatever is left in the business is what they eat off of. And that's the difference. One is an expense to the business up front, and the other is a extraction of capital out of the business on the back end.
So basically, after business has paid for, let's say, all software, or maybe you have an employee, contractors, stuff like that, then whatever is left over, you take a percentage of that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Basically.
depending on how aggressively you're scaling. Because some people that they don't take owner's draws at all. That's very, very common. People do not pay themselves in their businesses. So how do they eat? Off their savings. And that's honest. I'm being very honest with you.
Okay.
That's how some people do it. But you don't have to do it that way. It's up to you.
Yes. All right. So guys, so we're gonna be coming back in a minute. Okay, I see some questions coming in. Keep putting those questions in the chat. All right. So we'll be right back. Stay tuned. This is Breakfast with the Brand.
There's slow growth and then there's scale. There's incremental growth and then there's exponential growth. What I want to talk to you about is adding a zero to you and experiencing exponential scale. Incremental growth says 1 + 1 is 2. Exponential growth says 1 + 0 is 10. Incremental growth says 2 + 2 is 4. Exponential growth says 5 + 0 is 50. Guys, listen, when you add a zero to you, you can add a zero to the marketplace. You can add a zero to the value that you bring. So you can add a zero to your family, add a zero to your legacy. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about incremental, we're talking about exponential. I always say that business is a spiritual game. Just imagine when you combine your skills, your values, your abilities, your talents to something bigger than you, something greater than you, something like the power of exponential. That is adding a zero. Add a zero to your competence, add a zero to your confidence. This is about adding a zero in your life, your value, your industry, and your mission. Let's grow. So when you're young, mommy tells you to play nice. Play nice, Timmy. Let all of the other kids play too. But in business, it's not about playing nice. In business, it's about winning. It's about adding multiple zeros to your revenue. Now, of course, your staff wins. And when you win, other people win. However, when it comes to competition, you absolutely must dominate. You can't play for participation, and you can't play just to get along or just to get by, because business is serious. Business will help you to change the world, or the world will change you. Your people will either win or your people will lose based on your level of leadership, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to sacrifice, and how much you know about dominating.
All right, guys, so we are back. Welcome to Breakfast with the Brand. If you are now tuned in, it's not too late. Go ahead and put those flames and those questions in the comments. Today, we're talking a little bit about accounting and economics. Like, I find this very interesting. Bobby, funny enough, man, I used to hate accounting back in school. Okay, I didn't have the best accounting teacher, but I used to love business though. I love business. I love economics. Accounting, not so much. But when you get in business, you start to realize just how important, like, all of what Bobby's talking about. Now, I have a question here from Dr. Michelle. So I'm gonna read it. So she says, so if liabilities are negative, let me read that again. So if liabilities are negative, meaning minus, would the equation, sorry, be assets minus liabilities equal equity? I hope does that make sense, Bobby? If the liabilities are negative, how do you have negative is that even a thing? Can you have negative liabilities, Bobby? Is that possible?
No, not necessarily. And this is a very interesting. So I'm trying to think of the simplest way to explain this. Double entry bookkeeping. That's where all of this begins. Double entry bookkeeping. So what double entry bookkeeping says is that what happens on one side of the equation has to happen on the other side of the equation. So when you think about credits and debits, okay, this will make a lot more sense. So if I increase a liability, I need to decrease a asset in order for these things to balance out. But because equity is what the business owns, and assets and liabilities are how the business acquired those things, that's what you're actually seeing. Now, I'm going to say that differently because I know you asked a loaded question. So I'm going to do my best to break it down for you. Think about the left side of the equation, assets and liabilities. That is how the business acquired the equity. Okay? So equity in the business is simply a fancy way of saying what the business owns. What the business owns, what the business is worth. Assets are how the business is, what the business is purchased. Liabilities are how the business purchased it. So once you have what they used, whatever form of capital they use to purchase the asset, that activity, that relationship is what produces the equity. So what you're seeing is a equation that is accounting for double entry bookkeeping on one end, and then what this looks like on the other end. So I'm going to give you an example. So let's say you used revenue in order to pay for labor, and the labor is then transformed into an end product. So the liability is wages, but the wages that you pay actually produces an asset, because it's the wages that you pay as a liability that help you create the asset, which is what that individual is being paid to do. So it cancels itself out. So because it cancels itself out, the equity is whatever the value is from what that individual is able to produce. And that's a very simple way of thinking about it. The asset is what they create, or it's like it's a circle. It's so interesting to explain this without like showing it to you. But please put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense. What you're simply doing is, with double entry bookkeeping, is you're saying when one asset goes down, the other liability goes up. So if I'm making purchases, I'm taking on liabilities, my assets are going down. But the liabilities that I take on don't necessarily mean that they're bad. It just means that it's causing that class to go down. So an asset goes up, money's coming in. If liabilities go up, then things that I'm buying are, and this is it's semantics too, because you're taught, like from social media, people think that liabilities are bad. They're like, oh, don't be a liability. Oh, liabilities are this. Oh, credit is that. No, in accounting, these terms really have real meanings. So in the world of accounting, a liability isn't necessarily bad. A liability simply means that it's the direction in which the asset class moves. That's all it means. It's the direction. It's not either good or bad. So Junior, if you could ask a few clarifying questions, I think questions
I was about to get into that.
help them out.
This is really good because, guys, I'm just like you. I know nothing about, I know assets and liabilities, but I don't know anything about accounting. So I'm literally just like you. So this is phenomenal, Bobby. So here's what I heard, and let me know if what I heard is what you were actually trying to say. So what I'm hearing is that, okay, equity is the sum of assets and liabilities. Assets and liabilities represent money coming in and money going out. It's just like energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, meaning that you convert. So if you have an asset, like if I pay Bobby, let's say I'm setting up, let's say I'm building like a house, okay? I pay, let's say I pay Bobby, just for simplicity, $100,000 to build a house. When I pay Dr. Michelle, the payment, me writing that check, is taking money, cash, out of the business. So that payment, right, Bobby, is a liability because the direction is moving out of the business. But here's the thing. Energy is not created or destroyed. So where does it go? It creates that energy that's coming out, or that money that's coming out. It then creates the asset, which is the house. So the money leaves. So I'll use just energy because that's the way I interpret it. The energy leaves the business in the form of the money that you write on the check, but it then returns to the business in the form of the asset, which is the house. Is that correct, Bobby?
That's
So
correct.
what happens is that you have less cash, okay, but it's not because you've spent. So what you spend doesn't come back. You've invested, okay? So you converted money going out into an asset. Is that right, Bobby? So you've not gotten rid of the $100,000. You've converted it from cash into something else, which is the asset in the business. That's what I understand. Am I correct?
Right. You've got that right. And that's where valuing a business really comes into play, because you've got on one side the assets and the liabilities, and then on the other side you have the actual value of those energy transfers. So not all energy transfers are made equal. So let's say I purchased something for $100,000, but the return on investment is only $50,000. That shows up in the equity, and that's not going to be good. That's going to be like, hey, what happened to that money? Like, why was the return so low? So that's where this really becomes important, because a lot of people find themselves making investments, but those investments aren't paying off. And that's where the energy, so to speak, dissipates. That's where businesses go broke.
So let me ask another question, a follow-up question. So okay, so as a business owner, what I hear you saying is my job as a business owner is to convert money into assets, cash, sorry, into assets.
Mm-hmm.
So I pay for stuff. So for example, if you invest in like a coaching program, that is an expense. So that's a liability. That's leaving the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you have to do is convert that into an asset by producing value. Okay. And value to me means utility, meaning that it's something that I can use by producing value, which then becomes an asset. In other words, if I invest 5K in a coaching program, that gives me a skill that I'm able to generate 10K. So for example, if you learn sales, let's say you spend 2.5 on a sales course, and then you're able to now that you have the skill, you could make 2.5, 2.5, 5K. So let's say you make like $100,000 when you learn the skill of sales and you only invested 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're referring to? So that's you spending money, but that's you investing money. That's not you spending money. Spend to me means I let it go and it doesn't come back. When I invest means a circular movement, meaning that I'm putting out, but what I put out is returning to me. That's why
Mm-hmm.
now of course you can get more technical. You could say, oh, you could have a bad investment, stuff like that. I just interpret that as me just spending money. If I spend money, like if I go to let's say like a Domino's or a restaurant or something and I buy a meal, I don't expect to get that money back. I'm not looking for that money to come back. To me, that's a spend. But if I put money into a program or I put money into like a website or something like that, I'm expecting that money to return and to return with friends. And to me, that's an investment. Am I
Mm-hmm.
sort of gauging this right?
You are. And what I'll do is I'll even give you some simplicity here, because I see Joel and Michelle both in
Yeah,
the
let's
comments.
get a. Can I read that? Let me read that. Let me read
Mhm.
that. Um, I read a few of Dr. Michelle's comments. Let's start from up here. I'll just read through all of them and then
Mhm.
you answer it. So she says, so even though the liability used um, form of payment to acquire it, the value is what is being considered. That is why it is plus and not minus. Yeah, because it's money. So liabilities are always coming out. Assets are always coming in. That makes sense, Bobby. So assets are green, liabilities are red.
So they have to cancel each other out. So a
Exactly.
liability is a net negative, if you want to think about it that way. So if you were to think about a an equation, think about two negatives make a positive. Think about it like that. So if I had a positive plus a negative, then I would get a negative, but I don't get a negative. And I don't want to go any deeper than that. But like that's how you need to think about it. Like think about basic mathematics. So if you had, or algebra rather, basic algebra. If I if my asset goes down, let's say I've got a negative, my assets go down. So let's say that's a negative asset plus a liability, which is going is a net, like it's a natural negative. It's automatically negative because it means I'm losing. If I add those two things together, I end up with a positive. Now, ultimately, what you're trying to achieve with this, to be as simple as possible, is a cancellation. That's what you should get, is a cancellation. If you don't get a cancellation, that means there's money unaccounted for. But I have an even simpler way of explaining that. I just wanted to answer that one question, but
Okay.
that's why it's a plus, because you need to think of it as an equation. Much.
Yeah. Let's keep it going. I'm gonna read all of them. So she says, therefore it is a minus. So it seems as though liabilities in the equation is considering the value it added, not the money it took to purchase that. Is that correct? Let's go. I get assets, but still need more explanation about liabilities.
Mhm.
Liabilities make up assets. I think assets are on one side of the balance sheet, Do you see? That's where they get it. So check this out, Bobby. So I'm being a student right now. I'm writing down notes, and I could answer that. Assets and liabilities are on the same side of the balance sheet. Equity, so assets plus liabilities on this on one side, and equities on the other side of that. So because you see, people are thinking like, okay, assets on this side, liabilities on that side. They're on the same side. Equity is on the other side of the equal sign because assets cannot equal liability. So where's the equity? Does that make sense? So if you put assets on the other side, your equity minus your liabilities equals your assets. That's the way it is. If you are to like just basic math. So they're on the same side. It's just that they're the same thing in a different form. Liability is money coming out. Assets mean money coming in. And when you do this equation, it's like we're assuming that you as a responsible business owner, if you put money out, the money's supposed to come back in. Now, here's the thing. A lot of us put money out and then the money doesn't come back in. So so then it becomes like a spend. So now you have increased liabilities, you have less assets, and then you have a smaller equity. All right. And then she says, so the assets and liabilities should balance each other out. No, assets and liabilities balance equity. If so, I'm back to my initial equation, assets plus liabilities in the so assets and liabilities are on the same side, Dr. Michelle. Assets and liabilities balance equity. Assets and liabilities don't balance each other. That's where your thing is. So the equation is there you go. Assets, yeah. Now another thing too, Bobby, and I have a question. You see, to the regular person who's not an accountant, we look at like so the plus and the minus sign. That's something that's very interesting in accounting. Is it slightly different? Because I think one of the confusing parts about this whole thing is we say assets plus liabilities, but liabilities appear to be something that's negative.
That's
So
correct.
the real equation assets plus, and I'm using brackets, plus minus, so minus liability. So whatever that amount is. So in other words, let's say your asset is $100, your liabilities is 50. Is the real equation assets plus brackets minus 50 equals equity, which would then be 50. Is that what the real equation is? Or is it 150? Meaning assets plus liabilities. So if your liabilities is 50, your assets is 100. Is it 150 equity? So I think that's where the confusion is.
Absolutely. So I'm going to break this down for you guys. I'm gonna break this down for you all so that everything makes sense. So I'm gonna give you legitimate accounts so that you can follow me. A legitimate account. So under assets, I'm gonna give you an asset account. Bona fide accounting, guys. Y'all taking me back to the classroom. Shame on you. No, I'm kidding. I don't mind. Okay, so an asset would be a cash account. So assets, these are accounts, ladies and gentlemen. You have asset accounts, you have liability accounts, and you have equity accounts. So I'm going to give you two asset accounts. So another asset account that I want you to use is going to be, let's use inventory. Now, inventory is, let's say you're selling t-shirts, and these are pre-made t-shirts. They're ready to go. All right. Now I'm going to give you some examples of liability accounts. So a liability account would be accounts payable, and then let's do debt. Let's do debt. And then an equity account would be capital, okay? And another equity account could be something like, let's keep it simple, something like preferred stocks. See, y'all made me go deep today. Shame on you guys. All right, let's go. So, accounting wasn't necessarily designed for the small business, but it's not designed for the small business. But for some of this stuff to make more sense to you, you have to understand the big picture of big business, of like how money really moves in an economy. So we're going to start with equity and work our way backwards. So capital can show up in many forms. You can have human capital, you can have monetary capital. Capital is what you use in order to create results. So the more capital that you control, the more results that you can actually produce in many cases. So capital is what people buy when they're buying a business. So when they're looking at your business system and they're looking at your equity, like you're trying to sell the business, they're not looking at your revenue per se. They're not looking at profits per se. They're looking at how much capital you control. And that control of capital determines things. So keep that in mind. That's one equity account. Another equity account is preferred stock. And the reason I use this account is because if you are we've been talking about Budweiser for a while, or Bud Light, whoever had that masculine brand, and then they brought in that one individual and it caused the brand to go down. So equity is stock. So let's say the board brought in these individuals, and when they brought these individuals in, the stock plummeted. When the stock price plummets, that's what the company controls. They control the outstanding shares. So when they give stock to you to own, you own that stock now. So you'll become a part owner. But they also own all the shares that are not outstanding. So you can drive their non-outstanding stocks up by the value of your own stock. So this is very important, and it's a bit complicated, but this is important because that's why assets plus liabilities equal equity. Because the assets that you have in the company, along with the liabilities that you're using to drive the business, both affect the potential stock price, the price of that stock. So those two things work together. Same thing with capital. You can have capital in the form of assets, cash that you can touch, and you can have human capital in the form of people actually working. So the human capital of the people working plus the cash capital that you have is human capital plus financial capital, and the financial capital plus the human capital equal the combined capital, and the combined capital is what equals the equity. So when we go and look at a liability account, we're looking at accounts payable. So accounts payable means what money do you have to pay out in order to keep operations going. So you can have all the cash in the world, but if you can't execute on operations, you have no business. So liabilities are not bad. Liabilities are what keep the business going. So lights is a liability. Okay. Water is a liability. Wages is a liability. Systems is a liability. Personnel is a liability. All of these liabilities are what we call operational expenses. Operational expenses are liabilities. You can have all the skill, which is an asset, all the money, which is an asset, all the inventory, which is an asset. But if you don't have the operations to move those assets, you don't have a business. You can't collect money. You can have assets, but without liabilities, you don't have progress. You don't have revenue. You don't have sales. So assets plus liabilities equal the value of the company, which is the company's ability to profit.
Nice. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, More with Mr. Bobby Stell. Stay tuned.
I said Shaan Ride East. I'm proud. That's Shaan Ride East. Leadership is not the brand they made for us.
Listen, he brought fire, heat. He didn't hold back.
20 years down the line, what I could sell, why not serve first? Service over salary. Branding like a leader closes the gap for people who want branding. Speaking like a leader closes the gap for people who are nervous about speaking. If Steve Jobs would have speculated, we wouldn't have Apple.
He changed lives. He helped people open up their business and start their business.
We are the brand. Some people say, Shaan, should I quit my job? Mentally, yes.
As a speaker too, to be able to learn from him and watch him and game respects game. And I want to have that much game someday.
The right client, pay $500,000 for what you do. You have to be bold in your beliefs.
He has been an amazing asset to this event and a pleasure to work with. Very captivating, collaborative, worked very well with the audience.
I want to help you. Put a 0 behind your number, right?
The session was great. How he is online, virtually, he is even more phenomenal in person.
Be the face of change that you want to see. Stop asking questions and start giving demands.
The entire team has just been absolutely incredible. They are a joy to work with. They go above and beyond.
Give yourself a round of applause. Yes, yes, yes.
All right, guys, so we are back, and today has definitely been, I don't even know how to say, an insightful breakfast with the brand. If you've gained a lot of value from today, just put some more flames in the chat. Bobby, this has really been amazing, man. This has been amazing. I need to brush up on my accounting. I'm thinking of where can I get a course? How can I start, brushing up on this stuff? Because I need to learn about this. Like, it doesn't make sense if you're making money if you don't know what to do with it. It literally does not make sense. So, guys, by the way, if you need help with this stuff, you could just send Bobby a message on any social media platform. Bobby does have a company that does that, right, Bobby? So your company does stuff like this, accounting, and you help entrepreneurs as well, right?
That's right.
So definitely send Bobby a message if you want to learn more about this. Unfortunately, we don't even have enough time. It looked like the hour flew by so quickly. We have like 2 minutes left. We don't have enough time to go through all of this, but let me ask you a quick question. Did you finish up like the entire equation? Like, is there anything that you might have left out? I think we got into the capital. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there, Junior. In 60 seconds, the only thing I would like everybody to know before they leave this particular call is that's why branding, marketing, and sales is so important. So everybody, you guys saw how hung up we were getting on liabilities. That's because liabilities move the money. Assets is what the liabilities are moving. And I pay very close attention to what I'm saying. Equity is the destination. So let's say we want to make more and more money. We want the company to be more and more valuable. So the destination is equity, improved equity. The process of moving this money, moving toward this destination is a matter of liabilities. Now, what you're moving is the car. So the car is the asset, but the gasoline, the gas is the liabilities. You have to fill your car up over and over and over and over and over again. But if you can keep your car fueled up, you will eventually get to where you're trying to go. So when you think about branding, marketing, and sales, you're thinking about the efficiency of your car. So if you know what a Hummer is, that's a really big, very non-aerodynamic truck that guzzles tons of money, like tons of gas. So what you want with a brand, if you have a strong brand, your car is aerodynamic. If you have good marketing, then you have really good fuel economy. If you have good sales systems, then you have really good tires, good everything else. So if you combine good tires with good fuel economy with a good aerodynamic vehicle, then the gas it takes you to get to your destination is less. That's the name of the game. The name of the game is having an asset, such as an offer, and then having a system that allows the liabilities that you incur as a business to move you faster than your competitors. And that's where market share comes from, is your ability to get to the destination. We call that speed to market.
Yeah, I have one more question before we sign off. And I
Yes.
want you don't take too much time on this. I already see we're gonna have to do another show on this, but I'm just curious. Something just came to mind. If assets, so okay, if assets is what you move to what you use, sorry, to move the sorry, if liabilities are what you use to move the assets, where does profit come into play? How does one profit? Like where does profit come into that equation that you gave us?
So
Where's the
again,
profit in there?
very quickly from what we talked about yesterday. So if you guys didn't see yesterday, go back and watch it. Profit is all about speed and longevity. So everybody's doing the same thing in your industry. What you want to do with profit is create barriers to entry. So when Amazon starts to profit, they don't stuff that money away. They add to their business to make it more difficult for new entrants to come in. So there's this concept known as, in very simple, disruptive innovation. What that means is that out with the old, in with the new. The way you protect longevity is by making it harder and harder for new people to enter your market. And that's what the use of profit is. It's not to say you never profit. It's to say you don't really start to enjoy those profits until you have such a big control of your industry that you're not going anywhere. But pay very close attention to this and I'll sign off. Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Most people think Coca-Cola is more valuable than Pepsi. On the balance sheet, it is not. Coca-Cola has a bigger brand, but Pepsi has a more valuable company. And that's because Coca-Cola takes its profits and issues those profits back to the owners in the form of dividends. So they stop reinvesting the profits. And when they stop reinvesting the profits, they stop increasing their market. What Pepsi did instead is they started buying more companies. They started buying Frito-Lay. They started buying all of these other companies. So now they have brands under them. So they don't issue dividends. So that's the accounting piece. They don't issue as much of a dividend to their shareholders as Coca-Cola does because they spend their profit increasing the value of their company.
Excellent, guys. So thank you so much, Bobby, for sharing that with us. I see more questions coming in, but we're gonna have to stop here for today. Definitely, if you want to get more questions answered, then join us tomorrow, same place, same time. This has been absolutely amazing as usual. So thank you so much. Guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a phenomenal day and let's grow.